Hello and welcome to BQ Prime, the open network for digital commerce, touted to be the UPI of e-commerce. It's expected to make e-commerce more inclusive, more accessible for consumers and for sellers. It aims at promoting open networks for exchange of goods and services online. Now, while there's enough information available on the anatomy of the ONDC network, we want to delve a little bit more into the economics of it. We have with us Shireesh Joshi, Chief Business Officer at ONDC. Sir, thank you so much for taking time out to join us. So to begin with, while we understand that the ONDC is a digital public good, how does the network plan to make, how do each of the players in the network make money?
So network participants will make money pretty much the way do anywhere else. Right? So this is a commerce enabler. And so whatever commerce takes place, they will charge their fees either as a percentage or as a fixed fee, depending on the service they provide and to whom they provide. So as and when people buy those services and avail of those services, then whether it's a commission, they'll pay a commission. If it's a fixed fee, they'll pay a fixed fee. Some of them may also, have a different model where the income is not derived from the transaction itself, but something else that sits on top of that. So those are all various models. The idea is that the model is flexible and there is no one necessarily set way by which they will do it. But the protocol that we've created allows that for whatever transaction has taken place in terms of an item being bought, then there is an opportunity for a fee or a commission to be paid to all the parties that are involved in that transaction. Now, because it's an unbundled network, the buyer side activities are done by a buyer application, the seller side activities by a seller application. And if it's a physical item and it's being shipped, then there is a logistics company also involved. So whatever money is being paid as a sum total of product plus delivery that the buyer has paid, then the money needs to be shared between these three. And so each will declare their charges before the checkout takes place. And once the buyer has said, yes, all is fine, and I'm checking out, then those become the fees that are available. So each party will determine what pricing they want to charge and what commission they want to charge that is viable for them.
All right. So you mentioned that, it depends on, each transaction, what the arrangement is. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, so for some commission rates might be pre-decided. I mean, how will that work?
So the way it will work is that when a buyer is searching for a product, the buyer logs into their buyer application, and it could be any kind of application. It doesn't have to be an e-commerce application. It can be any application that has enabled the ONDC protocols to provide buyer-side services. So the buyer enters a product. Then when the buyer application wants to get answers to that product, the buyer application will broadcast that to all the seller applications that have catalogs for that product. When they do that broadcast, they will do that broadcast along with their terms and conditions. So the term and conditions could be that, okay, somebody is looking for an office chair and we will take a 50 rupee commission for whatever chair eventually gets bought. Or somebody is looking for an office chair, we will take a 3% commission for whatever is bought. Right? So it depends on what their preference in their terms. The protocol allows either one to be set. So the buyer application broadcasts that requirement, saying that an office chair, and maybe there is more detail, black color with wheels, etc., whatever the specification is, and with the expectation of what they expect to charge. They may also have additional terms and conditions that money will be paid only on delivery. It will not be paid at the time of order. So that could also be a term and condition. Now, the order item and the terms and conditions at which the buyer application wants to operate will be broadcast to the network. The network, the way it does it, looks through the registry. We'll identify all the vendors' catalogs of the office chairs, look at all the seller applications on which such catalogs are registered, and it will broadcast to all those seller applications. The seller applications will then look at their catalog. In the catalog are product descriptions, but there are also the seller's terms and conditions. Now, a seller may have declared that I'm okay paying, let's say, up till 5% commission. So now, if that is the case, that the buyer is asking, let's say, for 50 rupees, which for a 5,000 rupee chair is only a 1%, and the seller has said, I'm willing to give up till 5%, then these terms are compatible. And this is not a human phone call, how much do you want? How much do you want? It's not a haggling. It's a machine-to-machine set of condition and matching. If it matches, then because of that match, the details of that seller and that catalog entry goes to the buyer. So the buyer sees all the sellers where the item matches what he or she is searching for, and where the terms of trade that have been agreed between the buyer and seller are compatible. Right? So that's how it will take place.
Will larger sellers have more sway in deciding things?
Why do you think they will?
I mean, just like, so for instance, even in UPI, a GPay maybe might tend to have, a little bit of an edge. So, I mean, just going by the fact that, it's a larger seller.
So let me point you to a couple of other places. And I think those are more appropriate. Let's first talk about the world of websites, and then we'll talk about the world of banking. Now, what happens in the world of websites? People who create websites publish them somewhere. And people who want to see websites do it through a browser. Now, does it matter whether I'm using the world's most popular browser or a browser that my tech-savvy nephew created and he and I are the only users? As long as the browser is using HTTP protocol, we'll be able to see the entire net and I'll be able to see any website. Likewise, does it matter that my website was published on the largest website publishing platform or it was on my home computer which I've connected to the internet? It doesn't matter. So in an open network, when all parties can see all parties, the size of the parties that are connecting does not matter. Let's talk about banking. Now, we know there are large banks, medium-sized banks, very, very small banks, and maybe cooperative banks. Does it matter that I can, it helps me if I'm only with the largest bank? Today, it doesn't, because with whichever tool, NEFT, IMPS, UPI, SWIFT, I can send money from any account to any account. And if I want to do it physically, I can write a check on my bank, which can be deposited in any bank. So I don't need to necessarily join a particular large bank to be able to do it. So if I am in a place where the bank that is next to me is actually a relatively smaller bank, maybe in the hierarchy of banks in the country, it is ranked number 50. Now, I don't have to go hunting all over town for India's largest bank and open an account there. I will happily bank with whoever. Why? Because for me, that works out well. So in an open, interoperable network, size no longer becomes a factor.
Will sellers, at least maybe in initial stages, especially some of the smaller sellers, do you think that, they're going to have to resort to heavy discounts like we often see on e-commerce sites, like I said, at least during the initial run to attract buyers?
So the context defines the behavior. And this may be a little bit unpleasant example, but hopefully it'll explain the context. So think of somebody who spits on the road. They don't spit in their own home. Same person, but because the context is different, the behavior is different. Now, the behavior is different when the world of e-commerce is defined by platforms where both parties have to be in the platform, otherwise you can't do e-commerce. Therefore, the entire focus and the behavior is to grab as many buyers and sellers as possible by whatever means possible. Obviously legal, of course. We're not suggesting that it's illegal, but by whatever legal means possible, but gather as many buyers and sellers. Because then once I have lots of them, then I, as a profit-making organization, can start earning lots more profit than if I had very few. So all the behavior is driven by getting people on and locking them in. Because if you're on my platform, you can only transact on my platform. To transact on another platform, other platform will have to do the similar activity or different activity, and it will be dependent on what buyers and sellers are available there. So if I can raise to a large scale today, then I automatically create a barrier for entry for somebody else. And so there it's a strategic advantage, a competitive advantage, and therefore it's worthwhile investing in it. So the behavior of pricing, discounting to build a large base is driven by the context of closed spaces where you can't transact across. Moment you have an open network, you don't see that behavior. For example, do you see banks discounting their services to attract more depositors? They don't. Do you see browsers offering price incentives for people to use their browser versus somebody else? They don't. So in an open network, which is a very different context, there is no benefit to any entity to expend effort like discounting and deep discounting to attract a user, because there is no binding factor to the user. In a platform, there is a binding factor. If I'm a very, very large platform and I do these activities, then the user, if the user is not happy for whatever reason, or I've stopped offering the discount, now I'm offering only at full price, the buyer is already on my platform, sees large number of sellers, has certain experience, will say, if I leave this and go somewhere else, then I might not get that opportunity, therefore I will stay here. But on ONDC, the buyer loses nothing. The buyer goes to a different application and will still see the same thing, right? Which is why browsers don't do it. If a browser was to say that, I'm going to offer a financial incentive to use me, they may do that for a while and people may use that. Moment I stop giving that incentive, if there's a better browser, somebody will just simply go there. There is no barrier. So the behavior of discounting is of zero benefit in an open network. And therefore, because the context is different, the behavior will automatically go. It will not be required. And in fact, it will be detrimental to anybody to actually do such a discounting behavior because they'll get no business benefit for it. They get a business benefit in a closed platform, but in an open network, they will not get a benefit.
Sure. Okay. And, for buyers, like we've read even before ONDC, like, a very large part of even the buyer market remains untapped because of all sorts of challenges, maybe especially so in rural areas. So post ONDC, I mean, how are some of these challenges going to be overcome? Like, what I mean to ask is, will some of these challenges still remain? Like maybe awareness, for instance, or something else from the buyer's perspective?
So initially, awareness will be an issue. Now, a large part of the country is aware of buying online. It's just that they may not do it often enough because what they're looking for is not available. Today, we estimate that the participation of digital commerce as a percentage of total commerce in the country is still in single-digit percentages. More than 90% is still taking place physically. And so despite all the investment, despite all the noise that has been created in e-commerce, if more than 90% is physical, it means that people aren't finding the solutions or do not believe that solutions are possible and have not chosen to participate. Now, the existing e-commerce models tend to follow a certain predictable standard path, which is, as we've spoken just now, the goal is first to create scale and then to find solutions that work for something that is at scale. So what happens is that because you're at scale, you want to, for example, show top selling items. And if you bought one item, they will sell you what most people who bought that item also bought. Right? So everything is gravitating towards whatever is happening at scale. I may not want that detailed solution. Right? I like the pani puri that's made by the fellow who's down the street. So I don't want India's largest selling pani puri. I want that particular one. So scale is no longer important. Right? So there are many choices where scale is not a factor. So that's one example. Now, if I have a method by which I could discover the pani puri wala there, and he doesn't have to pack it very nicely as long as there is a delivery mechanism, and the delivery mechanism could just simply be the morning newspaper delivery guy on a bicycle. He's idle for the rest of the day. He's happy to deliver these small items and he picks up the pani puri and comes and delivers it to me. So now we've done what? We've created, first of all, we've tapped into existing capacity that was sitting idle. Second, we've enabled people to discover providers in a different way than the scale method allows. So there are many such solutions. Now, you could be a bamboo chair manufacturer in one village and you have a buyer in the neighboring village who wants to buy. You don't want a car or a motorcycle driven delivery person coming to my village home, picking it up, taking it to the nearby town, putting it in that logistics hub, and then it's getting automatically sorted. And then a new bike rider with that chair is going and delivering to the village that is right next door. If there was a delivery person who was willing to sign up and deliver directly, that would be possible. So today, e-commerce solutions, because of the way they're constructed, because they're a business, every business wants to become big because they want to become big, they want to drive scale. And because they drive scale, then they are only able to solve solutions that only work at scale. And by unbundling this and allowing different parties to connect differently, you allow all kinds of models to be possible. So you allow scale models to be possible. You also allow the last mile models to be possible in various fashions. And so because of this, we anticipate that many models will be possible. Many participants will come in. Now, you don't need to be an e-commerce company to be part of network, right? We spoke of banks. So a bank could enable all the merchants registered with them and become a seller application. And you could have a social media company becoming a buyer application who has a large base of users. So somebody on social media is placing an order and a bank is responding to that order. Of course, taking their seller, not responding directly as a seller itself. And so you're creating an e-commerce transaction between two entities that are not part of e-commerce today. So by allowing more entities to participate, by allowing more bases, user bases or seller bases to also be able to join the network very easily without doing anything extra, and by allowing many kinds of combinations and models to be possible, you are creating the basis for that expansion. Otherwise, if the only e-commerce was scale, big, then it will only work for the solutions where big matters.
Okay, so from what I understand, like a large part of the platforms, the network success also depends on while we have like this buyer market we know is ready and existent to be tapped into.
Right.
What about the seller market? Like say the platform, a Paytm, for instance. How robust, how vibrant does that part look like? For ONDC or to tap into ONDC?
Sure. So first of all, on ONDC right now, Paytm is present as a buyer application, not as a seller application. So as you look at their current solution, then look at it from the lens of looking at a buyer application. Now, today we have 5 parties who are live on the network as seller applications. They have done the task of onboarding sellers. Some of the sellers were already digitally present, so they had a catalog presence on some digital platform or the other already. And there are many who have never been in e-commerce. Now, when you deal with a seller who's never been on e-commerce, then you have to do 2 parts of the activity. One is you have to digitize their inventory and their catalog, which they've not done because they were not on e-commerce. And you have to upload that to your application so that it becomes visible to the network. Second, you also have to teach and train that party. So how will this retailer who's never been on e-commerce, how will you know there's an order on you? Do you get a message? Do you open an app and see a notification? And different people will have different solutions. So you have to teach them how to know they've received an order. Second, you have to teach them how to pack the order. So if the order is to be delivered in the neighborhood, then a standard paper bag might be sufficient. If the order needs to go to a different city, then it might need to be packed differently. And so you have to educate them on packing requirements. You have to educate them on expectations that when the order gets picked up, you will not be paid, or you'll be paid only 10%, right? But we are providing you this reconciliation tool, you can keep track of it. And we guarantee that within 10 days, you will get your full percent of money. Maybe you'll get part on after 5 days, part after X. So all these expectations, all this training will have to be taught. Today, it is being taught. Now, because it needs to be taught, that journey will take some time. Now, right now, the network is at a pilot phase. So this is taking place at a relatively small scale. But what we anticipate is as we open it up, very soon we will. So when we do open it up, then more parties will come and tools will get created so that everybody doesn't need to require a handholding and a detailed one. In the early days of website creation, you needed to go to a company that could build websites for you, and that was the only way. Now you have lots of templates available. You don't need a company. You can just simply pick from those templates and build it yourself. So we anticipate that at the initial stages, a lot of handholding will be required, and we're seeing it being required. But as time goes by, people will learn, build tools. Also, word of mouth will spread. And so people will figure out how to do it themselves, and they'll help their neighbors. So all those effects will come into play, and it will get easier and easier over time. So that's one part of it. Now, there are also people who are already on e-commerce. Their catalog is already digitized. They know the behavior required. All it is required is a few software steps to enable whichever platform they are on to be also made ONDC compatible, or for them to take their digital catalog and put it on another one if the platform they're on currently is not yet ready to go on ONDC. So through this combination, we will see sellers universe expand.
Okay, so how are each of these players sort of preparing themselves, as you gradually, like say logistics partners, for instance, just considering the nature of the network and what it plans to achieve, even each of these players would have to sort of put in a lot of preparation before they're actually ready to pull off something of this sort.
Yes and no. The logistics players who are live with us, Dunzo and Loadshare, they're already existing players. They know how to do their business, which is logistics. They also know how to do it through an online order that comes to them. So for them, the task has been more to do the ONDC integration, which they have completed. So now when there is an order on the network, they're able to respond to it, and the various software can, through API calls, provide the requisite information. So if there is a restaurant order that I've placed, the restaurant is 3 kilometers away, I place it on my buyer application. The seller application on which that restaurant was present showed that to me. I added to cart, I paid. Now I need it to be delivered. Let's say the restaurant seller application is the one in this transaction making the delivery. They will then take my address as a delivery location, the restaurant as the pickup location, broadcast it to the network. And currently with both these parties, they will get a quote from Dunzo, a quote from Loadshare, and they will decide who to ship it through, and it will come through it. So that's the structure by which the transaction is taking place.
Okay. Lastly, what are the timelines looking like?
So this is like asking, in January of 2020, when will we have the corona vaccine? We know we will have it. We know we're putting the world's best minds on it. We hope that it will happen in months, and actually it did happen in months, but you can't predict a date, that is etched in stone. Our situation is similar. We know ONDC is inevitable. ONDC will happen. We know it will happen at scale, but it's hard to predict a precise number or precise date because a few factors can change it dramatically. So a few weeks ago, for example, Snapdeal announced that they will join the network and bring 2,500 cities. So one single player could dramatically alter the scale. Now, if they don't come, then currently we're in 65 cities, right? So you have a sudden jump. So because of that, predicting a number becomes difficult. But I think what can be said is that the contributors to confidence will keep increasing. The number of domains that are present, the number of seller options that whichever domains are live, people will see, the number of locations where people can order. And as confidence grows and as word spread, then the rapidity with which others start to join will take place. Now, how fast that, because in any transformation, when it happens, it will happen dramatically. I don't think anybody could predict what UPI numbers eventually became. And so the focus should not be so much on what is that number going to be. I think people should have faith and examine the design and the protocol and the method and the systems to say, is this capable of achieving population scale? And if it is able to achieve population scale, then participate in bringing on board. And so I would say even you should play your role in saying, hey, this is what ONDC is, popularize the idea and encourage more people to join, because more the people join, the more others also will want to join it, and it will rapidly scale up. So the story is less about what is the number, what is the target, because this is not like one company, right? So if I was one company, a manufacturing company, I was setting up a plant, I know all the details. I know from where I'm ordering the equipment. I know who's doing my civil works. These are standard terms. I can say that my building will be ready in 6 months. The equipment will be delivered in the 12 months, and the commissioning will take another 6 months, 18 months, I'll be ready. And give or take a month, I'll most likely be accurate. But in a transformation like this, there are so many factors. How many seller applications will be ready? How many buyer applications will be ready? Now, we've had buyer applications that first said, we will simply enable the buyer experience in our existing app. As they started working, they said, you know what? While we can do it, there's probably a better experience that we can create if we create a completely new application. And so they've abandoned their first approach and gone to a completely new one. That's absolutely the right thing to do. But that changes the time on which they will come on board. And so because it is new, the journey is not very predictable. But the milestones are predictable, the sequence, and the end state is predictable. So what I feel very confident about is a year from now that in many places, shopping on e-commerce, shopping e-commerce on ONDC will be fairly well accepted as an activity. And 2 years from now, we'll have e-commerce solutions that we couldn't even think of today. That I feel very confident about. Now, will they happen in month 13 or month 15? And will I have 20 of them or 50 of them? I can't predict that. Right? And so it's more a case of what is the idea, what does it take to participate, and how do we accelerate it, and less about what is the number at the end of 3 months and what is the number at the end of 6 months.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. We're looking forward to covering the network more closely as and when things unwrap. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned to BQ Prime for more.